Nonetheless, when we did meet to discuss my case, and I asked for updates about any progress, he would start talking to me about his client in Colombia, his clown of a sister-in-law, his nephew going to water parks, trips he'd taken, his regrets, where he bought his gold sneakers, and many other unrelated, unimportant, time-consuming stories. Hello, and welcome back to WordWise. I'm your host, Kit, and today I'll be discussing Sarah Boone's 5th through 11th letters. It occurred to me after I posted my first video on Sarah Boone's letters that I probably should have given a little explanation of what I do, because a lot of new viewers are watching now that I'm discussing something other than Chad Daybell. I'm a professional writer and editor, and my interest is in the writing of criminals and people adjacent to crimes. I don't actually talk about the details of the crimes more than I have to, mostly because there are a million channels that do that better than I could anyway. My focus here is on Sarah's many letters. However, I do have a new blog where I'm going to start posting some of my thoughts about these cases. I'll put it in the description. Before we jump into letter number 5, I want to make a correction. I said in my last video that George was 140 pounds. I got that weight off an arrest report from August of 2019, but after I filmed the video, a new court filing revealed that George only weighed 104 pounds at the time of his death. It also said he was only 5'2", but he always reported that he was 5'4". I don't know. I don't know what happened that caused him to lose 36 pounds in 6 months when he already appeared very slim in his mugshot, and frankly, that makes me wonder and worry about a lot of things. But it does help explain how he was able to fit in that small suitcase. Also, I did a little digging and I was right about a couple of things that help explain Sarah's complaints regarding her lawyer's phone and why Judge Wooten didn't appear to do anything about them. I looked it up and I was right that spam blocking settings will often prevent collect calls from coming through, especially on cell phones. That's why no one answers, no matter how often Sarah calls. Calling collect is fine if you're only going to be in jail for a week or two, but the Orange County Jail also offers an option where people on the outside can set up an account so that inmates can call them, text them, video chat, etc. To be clear, the person on the outside is paying 15 cents a minute for these calls, and the account is prepaid and automatically reloads when all the funds are used up. So I think Sarah is demanding that Bankowitz set up an account so she can call him as often as she wants. And not only will the call go through, but he'll have to pay for it. Sarah says he'll get reimbursed, but that's not exactly accurate. Bankowitz isn't a public defender. He's a private defense lawyer who does contracted work for the state at the rate of $75 an hour up to $15,000 per case. And I believe that normally includes expenses. If he set up this phone account and she called him every weekday and they spoke for 10 minutes at a rate of 15 cents a minute, for the entire 14 months he was her attorney, that would come to $420. That might not seem like a lot to some people, but $420 is $420, and that's almost 3% of Bankowitz's entire pay for this case. Now, is 3% a large amount? No, but I'm sure he has other expenses. And I'm also certain that Sarah would not have been satisfied with a single 10-minute call every day. That's less than an hour a week. That would be unacceptable to her. I think if he had set up this account, she never would have stopped calling. He would have heard from her every single time a thought popped into her head. I suspect what happened is that he told her he would set up the account when he first met her, then realized she wasn't going to be respectful of his time or his money, and changed his mind. Sarah doesn't have a legal right to make her lawyer pay for her calls to him. So she can complain to the judge all she wants, but Judge Wooten isn't going to insist that Bankowitz pay for her phone calls. Just keep that in mind when she complains about him not answering the phone. When we left off in January of 2023, Judge Wooten had just denied a motion to withdraw filed by Sarah's 6th attorney, Mr. Bankowitz, and a counter motion from Sarah, who tried to get Bankowitz removed before he could dump her as a client. Neither of them got what they wanted. The trial was again delayed. 2 months after her last letter, Sarah wrote again. Letter number 5 was written on March 22nd, 2023. At this point, Sarah has been trying to reach Bankowitz for the last 6 weeks, but the 2 numbers he gave her don't work, likely because they can't collect calls, and he still hasn't activated the prepaid phone account that she wants him to set up for her. I even in my desperation to speak with you had an outside caller try to reach you on my behalf, who tried calling your office 3 times over the last almost 3 weeks, leaving a voicemail each time with no reply. We're both hoping you are able to reply to her email she sent today as another form of trying to communicate with you. I've exhausted my resources and am again just sitting here, waiting for you to contact me in whatever way you are able, and as soon as possible, please. Time-sensitive matters are at hand, as I have made you aware of previously, verbally and in my letters. Time-sensitive matters are at hand? What does that mean? The crime had occurred more than 3 years prior at this point. If these mysterious matters are related to her case, Bankowitz is probably handling those. And if they aren't related to her case, then why is she bringing them to Bankowitz? There's an odd thing after this. Apparently Sarah wrote on both sides of these pages, but whoever scanned the pages didn't notice and only scanned the fronts. So only 2 of the 4 pages got posted online. Sarah discovered this, of course, through whomever on the outside is helping her, and she's going to address it in her next letter. But we do have the missing pages, so I'm just going to cover them as if they weren't originally omitted. Actually, there's only one item of interest on page 2. Sarah is furious that Bankowitz scheduled 2 video calls with her, and they weren't able to connect either time. Why are you unable to correctly set up a video call, if you were even on the call? Please know, even though I am temporarily an inmate and incarcerated, I do have a schedule with classes, dorm trustee duties, and medical appointments which I have to be excused from for nothing. Please fix the connection problem. She's so rude. She's just railing on him for struggling to work Zoom. I assume she meant she's a dorm trustee, not a dorm trustee, whatever that might be. But I think what's most interesting in this excerpt is the word temporarily. I am temporarily an inmate and incarcerated. At first, I assumed this was a reference to her faith that she'll be acquitted, and that might be right, but given how angry she was at Bankowitz by this time, I almost wonder if there's a subtle threat here. As in, I'm not always going to be stuck in here. I'm probably being paranoid, but it's possible. My pre-trial conference, I found out, is now on March 31st, 2023, which you said previously, for whatever the reason, I am unable to attend any of these conferences. How am I supposed to know what's going on and what you are reporting and what is being discussed between all other parties except me, the main component in my case? Especially if we, in a still unestablished attorney-client relationship, are not in regular or proper communication with one another. If Bankowitz has actually been lying to her and saying she isn't allowed to attend her pretrial conference, that's completely unacceptable. But I doubt that happened, because something doesn't smell right here. If Bankowitz was doing something blatantly illegal, I feel like Judge Wooten would have stepped in. Also, we know from jailhouse records that Sarah has refused to go to court at times. I like how she's gone from claiming to be the other party in her case to the main component in her case. She seems quite triggered by the idea that people are talking about her when she's not around to hear them, and that seems to be another indicator that she's very concerned about how others perceive her. She doesn't want anyone to discuss her or her actions unless she's there to defend herself. Why can I not be in attendance and participate in my pretrial conference? How else am I to be kept updated in real time and actual minutes during the conference if not there myself? Why does she need to know what's happening in real time? I can't think of any practical reason. She's very impatient, but I think her desire for this is rooted in her belief that everybody else gets to hear about her case in real time, so she should too. She's more jealous than indignant. Help me understand, please. How can court TV, different news channels, and even professional YouTubers attend my pretrial conference and I cannot? How? I'm sure one of the other parties can help me with updates, since they will be in attendance for me also, should you be unable to provide. Why can I not be included in my pre-trial conference for my case? I'm sure also everything from the conference, collected from everyone else, will be vomited all over the internet, just like everything else has been, non-permissively, and can add even more dysfunction and ignorance to my prejudgment already made by the world in the great court of public opinion. I would like to be a part of all of this, seeing as it all pertains to me. Please, it is my right. One of the things I've learned from watching trials and covering all Chad's books is the extent to which people will pretend not to understand. As Sarah keeps reminding us, she had been in jail for 3 years by the time this was written. She knew how the Florida open records laws work. But for Sarah, feelings are facts. She feels the situation is unfair, so it must be unfair. She feels it's unreasonable, so it must be unreasonable. She feels she's being mistreated, so she's being mistreated. She feels she's innocent, so she's innocent. Sarah is placing so much weight on the truth and correctness of her emotional reaction, and yet she's unable to admit what those emotions are. She can't bring herself to say, "It hurts my feelings when people say bad things about me." Instead, she acts outraged that people have access to the very damaging evidence against Sarah. And you might say, well, it makes no sense to complain to Judge Wooten that her feelings are hurt. It doesn't make any sense to complain to him about the laws in Florida or Bankowitz's refusal to pay for her phone calls either, but she keeps doing it. She ends with this: "Trying my best always and thanking you in advance." Implication being, you haven't done anything worthy of gratitude yet. What a classy lady. Thus ends Sarah Boone's 5th letter. To whom it may concern. The enclosed letter I sent, March 22nd, 2023, was scanned incorrectly on the clerk's website, only the 1st and 3rd page. So I am resending with nothing on the backs to avoid confusion and were missed previously. I also received a copy of my copied letter today with only the same 2 pages included. Are my letters even being read? I wrote 4, but only 2 were copied, uploaded, and mailed. Clerical error? Yes, Sarah, it was probably a clerical error. These things happen. I feel like we know Sarah well enough, though, at this point, to conclude that the tone she intended here was clerical error. Not quite sarcasm, but certainly suggestive. Note, if you will, that this is a complaint. A complaint that someone failed to do something that Sarah has spent months complaining about them doing. It's not the publicity that bothers her. Sarah loves the publicity. It's the judgment that she finds upsetting. That, and I think that she felt like, by failing to upload the letter correctly, her opportunity to be heard was stolen. Sarah moves to her usual position on the board and begins complaining about Bankowitz. Something notable about her complaints is that they're always very specific. So here, she claims she hasn't seen him face to face in 8 weeks. But that isn't the same as having had no contact with him. Other times she complains that he hasn't called, which leads me to believe he was probably visiting in person. No matter what people do for Sarah, it's never enough. She always wants them to be doing more. She's now so angry that she hasn't seen Bankowitz face to face for 8 weeks that she not only underlines and rage caps, but she also jacks her handwriting up to like 22-point font and uses an asterisk. Judge Wooten, can you please have Mr. Bankowitz fix the phone problem? Say it again louder for the inmate in the back. Thank you for reading my entire letter and uploading correctly for all the world to read. Also, critique and judge wrongly and incorrectly as usual. Ignorance is bliss. She's a wronged woman. She's like the heroine of a 40s film. Then she turns contemplative, and at this point I think she's just writing because she likes the feeling of being seen. She doesn't have a point, she just enjoys talking. I wonder what platform of popularity I will be featured on next, and how much wasted time, effort, and thought will be put into mutating and grossly exaggerating my case information racketeered to the World Wide Web. Shaking my head, run with it. Whom is she instructing to run with it? The people exaggerating her story? I wonder, too, if I have a panel of letter readers dedicated to all the ones I've written. Enjoy. There's more to come. Aw, did she write that for me? I hope this video makes her feel understood. Wouldn't it be funny if Sarah Boone had a Cameo account through which you could pay her to write letters to people who annoy you? If she goes to prison, she's gonna need a hustle once that alimony runs out. Shout out to my supporters! Heart. What? Here, it becomes clear that these letters are consciously intended for more than one, or two sometimes, audience members. She isn't just writing to Judge Wooten, or just writing to Bankowitz, or just the two of them. She's writing to the world at large. I don't know who her supporters are, or if there are more than two of them, but she's very aware of how many people have been reading these letters, and presumably that's how she came to have supporters. There are people reading these letters and saying, "Oh, that poor woman, how unfair." Somebody is falling for this. Thus ends Sarah Boone's 6th letter. Judge Wayne C. Wooten, Attorney Frank J. Bankowitz, Whole Wide World. I'm not sure whether she included whole wide world with bitterness or delight. Even when she knows better, Sarah can't resist belittling people. It's second nature to her. She thinks of herself as a very polite, respectful person, and she can be, at times, but her resentments keep bubbling to the surface, and if she gets any sort of pushback, she immediately moves to arguing, and then to sarcasm, and belittling, and condescension, and also to tattling. Not reporting, not holding accountable, but actual tattling. That's why she CC'd Judge Wooten when she wrote to Bankowitz, and then wrote the governor about Judge Wooten. So she begins this letter by writing out the actual Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of perspective, even though she knows perfectly well that Judge Wooten knows what it means. And in the midst of her rage-capping and rants and definitions, she tries to turn the idea of perspective into a motif. It's honestly a more impressive literary feat than anything Chad Daybell ever accomplished in his fiction, but at the same time, it feels incredibly calculated. Let's look at the bigger picture, or perspective, to get a better view of what I've had more than enough time to see and realize. Did she plan this letter around the motif of perspective? Who plans a letter like that? Who thinks, I'm going to begin my letter to Grandma by establishing the motif of candy as an expression of love? And what really blows my mind is that she still isn't proofreading. She's planning these letters, but she isn't proofreading them. That makes me think she's extremely focused on the future and not at all focused on the past, despite her obsessive timekeeping and grudge holding. I even think you could take it a step further and argue that her refusal to reread what she's written is connected to her refusal to make an honest assessment of her past behaviors. The growing amass of ignorance, manipulation, slander, and advantageous gain must stop. My truth needs to be heard, and it is my right. Do not give me rights expecting me not to fully utilize them. I voted for the president and governor while here in jail, and stop violating what I've been trying to utilize, or lessen the value of my capabilities and opportunities. I am not apologetic in any way for being an observant, hardworking, above-average, non-stereotypical inmate. I can only imagine sadly how others not as outspoken as myself have been and are being mistreated, overlooked, and dehumanized. Get it together. This tells us that Sarah sees herself as observant, hardworking, above average, and a non-stereotypical inmate. I'm guessing by the last that she is upset by the stigma of being incarcerated, which is understandable. It's interesting that she wants to differentiate herself from the stereotype of being an inmate more than the reality of being an inmate. She also sees herself as patriotic, or at least civilly minded, capable, and outspoken. Is Sarah these things? I'm willing to give her outspoken, maybe non-stereotypical, in the sense that I don't think most inmates sabotage their cases to this degree. The person I hear her being compared to most often is Darrell Brooks, so non-stereotypical. The rest is debatable. She addresses the next section of the letter specifically to Judge Wooten. She does that thing where she includes a bullet-pointed list of stuff like, phone numbers given to client by attorney, 2. She writes out a list of constitutional rights that she feels are being violated, but only lists the amendment number, like First Amendment. Apparently, her letter being uploaded incorrectly has been recast from a clerical error to a violation of her constitutional rights. Then she gets into how angry she is that people online are judging her. Why am I being judged for my legitimate letters I write in order to know the status of my case, or attorney, and how much longer before something substantial occurs in the progress of 3.3 years later, other than the inappropriate prejudgments being made due to the excessive amount of my case information online, bigger and meaner fabrications of my case-sensitive details in which I have not seen, and even greater, mind-numbing one-sided ignorance. She's so worked up that she can't write anything approaching a sentence, and then she crosses what, in my mind at least, is a pretty big line. Why are you allowing numerous case safety and protection elements to be breached, violated, manipulated? Why has a gag order never been implemented? My case has turned into an unnecessary witch hunt from the innumerable violations of my case details being leaked and racketeered illegally in exchange for website hits, viewer ratings, etc., in exchange for $, $. What is your cut, Your Honor? Yeah. She accuses the judge of financially benefiting from the publicity around her case, which is pretty outrageous, and also probably unwise. Not only is there no evidence of this, her argument seems to rest on the idea that the only reason Judge Wooten hasn't issued a gag order is that he's profiting off the publicity. I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is that because the defendant's feelings are getting hurt isn't an actual legal reason to issue a gag order. And I think I know who she voted for president, because Trump misuses the expression witch hunt in exactly the same way. It's not even about the suitcase anymore. My case is now a global event with the video receiving over 3 million hits, depending on the website, in turn making me realize that's over 3 million less unprejudiced, unbiased, non-discriminatory, fair jurors I will have access to on my case. It's not even about the suitcase anymore. Sarah's right. It's not about the suitcase. It was never about the suitcase. It's about the man inside it. The man she left to die. But she basically never talks about George. I found one reference to him in these letters. We'll get to it. It's not what I would have expected. Despite letter after letter complaining that she's the victim, she never complains that she lost her boyfriend. She never says, the trauma of my boyfriend's death is being compounded by me getting wrongfully accused. Why doesn't she ever say that? Unless she doesn't feel it. Instead, What she seems to be saying here is that her situation is no longer even about George's death. It's not even about her and her case. It's about the miscarriage of justice she's enduring, which far, far outweighs George's life. This is now a global event. Her words are astonishingly callow. Her argument here, however, undermines itself. The video she's referencing is one I'm not going to show. Probably you've already seen it. It was discovered on her phone by the police. There are actually 2 videos, but one's only 10 or 12 seconds. The longer one, which I think runs more than 2 minutes, is footage Sarah shot of George in the suitcase. He's begging her to be let out and saying he can't breathe, and she's taunting him and cursing him. At one point, he calls out to her and she replies, "That's my name, don't wear it out." It is a haunting, sad video, and I think most people are in agreement that it's the reason Sarah should have taken a plea. She's right. It's going to be nearly impossible for people to see that video and still be impartial. But by making this argument, she's acknowledging that the video is damning. The evidence is damning. Her complaints also raise an interesting question. Why does she think that a jury will react differently to those videos than the general public has? Does she really think that there's some sort of context that would make the videos less horrifying? That would justify what she did? People with narcissistic traits often think they can talk their way out of anything, and she seems to be implying in these letters that the video won't look so bad when she can tell the full story. But I don't think that's likely. I'm not sure what she means by factoring at the beginning of this next sentence. Maybe she meant relevant? Factoring important private details should not be made ready and available for the world to know about before I, the defendant, does. Correct? This is wrong, unconstitutional, unfair, and not how justice is supposed to work for anyone. I'm tired of having motives attributed to me that are unreal, assumed, and inappropriate. This is not legal. 6. This is what a trial is for, correct? No, that's not what a trial is for. No, the purpose of a trial isn't the world premiere of a case. But I think that's how Sarah's imagining it. She's mentally and emotionally identified with her case now, so it's inconceivable that she isn't in control of it. She says the world isn't supposed to see the details of her case before she does. But she doesn't need to see the details of her case because she lived through the relevant events. No one knows more about the case than she does. The only thing she doesn't know is exactly what pieces of evidence the prosecution has against her. I think that's the real reason she's so desperate to see her discovery. 7. At this point, what can even be rightfully suppressed in my case? Once you ring the bell, it cannot be unrung. It's already been heard and seen. I don't even know where the bell is or who's ringing it. I think this metaphor got away from her a little. She again calls herself the main component in her case, drops in the word perspective a couple more times, and then demands to know what she can do to ensure the productivity, communication, incorruptibility, appropriation, I think she meant appropriateness, and intellectualism of her case. And I don't know what she meant by intellectualism. I guess she and the case are going to have long talks about existentialism and semiotics. Then it's back to her favorite subject, the phone line. And this time she's demanding Bankowitz explain why he's not in touch. She asks him to imagine himself in her position. Actually, she asks him to imagine himself in her slides, which I assume are those crappy shower sandals everyone in jail has to wear. I would rather be called a narcissist, pain in the ass, arrogant, strange, or whatever else anyone wants to waste their time to think of. Just don't call me an M, which I am not. No one knows me except for the ludicrous insanity that's been made up, mocked, edited and spewed all over the internet. It's not me. Ooh, double underline. I think what she really means is that she doesn't want to be seen as an M. Unfortunately, it isn't within her control whether or not she's legally deemed one. That, in fact, is the purpose of a trial. I'm hoping and praying my highly anticipated day will come, whenever that will be. It's God's timing. I continue to wait smiling. At least everyone will know I'm not sitting around eating bonbons watching soap operas. Does the jail commissary even stock bonbons? This woman really has the audacity to spew 7 pages of vitriol and then claim she's sitting patiently with a gentle, bucolic smile. Unfortunately, my perspective of our justice system is incredibly dim and dull. I hope my very overdue, blinding light has shone brightly for all to see a glimpse of how it really works. And being a system, we all have to work together to function in unison. Please help. See the difference I'm trying to be and make. Waiting and wondering, keeping it real. Now what? So now she's also a crusader for justice system reform? I'm really starting to think she expects to be acquitted and then named Times Person of the Year. Thus ends Sarah Boone's 7th letter. The next letter was written 5 or 6 weeks later, at the end of June 2023, but there's a handwritten note at the top saying something quite interesting. Hand-delivered, July 21st, 2023. Revisions made, July 20th, 2023. Original not uploaded to date. Second attempt to make public, like everything else in my case, including all my other letters. Freedom of speech. Mine. All for your review, critique, judgment, understanding. Try it. She revised this letter. I'm guessing the changes must have been significant if she rewrote the entire thing. It's not like she can print off another copy. She also implies here that she sent the first draft, but it wasn't uploaded. So this is her second attempt to make the information public. She declares that it's her constitutional right to make this information public, even though she's constantly complaining about other people gaining access to her public information. When something benefits her, it's an inalienable right. But when it benefits someone else and threatens her, then it's illegal. Again, we see how she interprets her feelings as an indicator of the truth and of fact. I was stunned by this straight from the mouth of a 2-year-old line here. Freedom of speech. Mine! Sorry, I had to read it that way. Sarah didn't write this letter to the judge. She filed it in open court through the clerk's office. The same clerk's office that makes all her letters available online. I'm not sure if she knew this or not, but the hypocrisy is amazing. And the snarkiness. Understanding. Try it. The letter is addressed to all, so I guess open court was the right place to file it. The purpose of the letter is to take control of the narrative. Sarah is going to tell her story of being the world's biggest victim, but she's only going to complain about her case and how she's been wronged. I think she envisions this as a sort of epistolary expose. This is how she introduces her subject. Where do I even start? Through the officer inmate grapevine and a letter I received from my fan mail, and usually the only way I find anything out regarding my case since there is no communication from my current attorney, now 10 weeks more of complete silence, and yes, my 6th attorney, which I will clarify momentarily, I was made aware my last letter was featured on the news locally, realistically meaning globally. Apparently my very legitimate, lawful, real questions and concerns I asked and am still caused a stir on top of the already engulfing whirlpool my case has become and made out to look like, which it is not. Hence, my previous questions from said letter. I am trying to protect and maintain my truth, which no one knows, since no one else will, however I can, and keep some of the illicit ugliness at bay. Mismanagement at its finest in everything. Sarah is upset that her story was featured on the local news, but she's also quite upset that she wasn't involved in the production. Sarah doesn't see a contradiction in these two complaints. She says her case has become an engulfing whirlpool, then said it's only been made out to be an engulfing whirlpool, and it isn't an engulfing whirlpool, and then she alludes to a secret truth no one knows, which elsewhere she's described as convoluted. She goes on at length, but it isn't until the end of this excerpt that we find out why she's really upset. Why wasn't I included at all? Why wasn't I asked prior to being highlighted so I would know what was said or asked or criticized so I could rightfully defend myself? What was so newsworthy? First, note that she describes her story being broadcast as being highlighted, a word with a very positive connotation. We highlight important things. But she goes on to complain that she wasn't given an opportunity to defend herself against things said, asked, or criticized. She says that to do so is her right, possibly constitutional in her mind. I'm amazed by the way it's so clear what she's writing about and what she's actually upset about are so different. How can I defend myself? I can't, so everything gets meaner, more evil, corrupt, and out of control. I think this excerpt has a double meaning. On the surface, it says that because she has no avenue through which to defend herself, basically because the news program didn't interview her before they ran the story, the negative publicity causes everyone to treat her even worse than they already do. But I think there's a second meaning. I think the question can be read rhetorically. She's asking, how is she able to defend herself when she knows what they're saying is true? She can't. She has no defense. I'm not saying she's legally guilty because that's not for me to decide. I'm saying that even she can't come up with a coherent justification for what she's done. Maybe things will come out in the trial that will change my opinion of that. It's possible. But it's hard to imagine, not just for us, but for Sarah as well. And allegedly. I believe this is what a trial is for, right? The world is supposed to learn everything about my case during the trial, right? This is not justice or a system, right? All fairness has been completely removed, right? No, that's not what a trial is for. It's not to tell the world your story. This isn't a TV movie of the week. And why does she end all these sentences with right? I have this strange feeling that she tried to steamroll us here. In the first sentence, it appears she actually is trying to get the reader to agree with her. I think her intention with the second sentence is the same, even though she's factually incorrect. But then the last two sentences aren't right at all. I don't even know what she's trying to imply by saying the justice system isn't a system. It's like she thinks she can get the judge to agree with her position by tricking him into continuing to answer right each time she asks a rhetorical question. In the meantime, here's a corner piece to my convoluted puzzle. All are wondering when it will finally be put together to see what the real picture is. And also a huge disentanglement of only an inkling of some of the misunderstandings and ignorance swirling about in my case. Before you try wearing my slides, know where they've been. What is this? Is she trying to hype up her trial? If she really wanted to tell the world her story, she could do it right here. She's been in jail for so long that she could have written several memoirs by now. Instead, she's selling delayed gratitude to the public at large. It's pretty wild. But you've got to give her points for style. She writes a colossal, almost incomprehensible sentence, as convoluted as the image it describes, and then she hits us with, before you try wearing my slides, know where they've been. That could be a tagline for the movie of the week about her story. The next thing she does is tell us her story from the beginning of her case. The pages she could spend telling us why she's innocent and we've all gotten it wrong, she spends whining about her attorneys. There's a lot of confusion out there about exactly how many attorneys she's had. I'm guessing that Sarah was assigned a public defender for her arraignment and didn't realize that was her actual lawyer. Judge Kranick's June 2024 order goes over the entire procedural history of the case, and he says that Padilla was her second attorney. But Sarah thinks he was her first, and that's the person she's ranting about here. Attorney number 1, private, February 2020 through May 2022. This attorney sold me the world, promised exoneration, and supplied an overabundance of other continuous false hopes so I would accept his offer to become my attorney. He had no idea what my case was going to be or was really about. So she wants us to believe that Padilla had no idea what her case was about, but he went ahead and promised her exoneration? If this is true, that's grossly terrible lawyering. I have a really hard time believing a lawyer would do this, even a bad lawyer. I don't think Sarah realizes how bad this makes her look either, because who would agree to accept representation from someone who would make promises like this without learning anything about the case first? Also, Sarah complains that several lawyers have tried to sell her on what a great job they'll do for her. And whenever she says that more than one lawyer has done the same inappropriate thing, I find her less credible. Then he deserted me, his client, naive and new, 2 weeks before my first scheduled trial due to irreconcilable differences, meaning I was not persuaded enough to agree with what he wanted me to say or do, and was not what happened. Sarah has started doing this thing where she adds a little descriptive clause after the word me. She doesn't do it very often, but it's hard not to laugh when she does. Then she appears to accuse Padilla of suborning perjury. To be clear, I am not saying this really happened. I doubt very much that it did. In fact, I suspect this is some kind of projection or transference. I'm not sure what to call it, but I think Sarah has completely reversed her and Padilla's roles in this situation. Maybe Darvo is the most accurate description of her behavior. I'm guessing, but given how important reputation is to Sarah, I suspect she wanted to tell something other than the truth, and Padilla wouldn't go along with it. That's my theory. There was no trust. There was no strategy, and if there was, I was never included in on it, or an innumerable amount of other case-defining details and questions left unanswered before going to trial. I felt he was sabotaging my case and setting me up for failure due to his micro amount of experience, which I found out about after the fact and was not disclosed prior to my acceptance of his representation in my macro-sized case. Again, she brings up not having been included fully enough. Her need for control just seems to gnaw at her. I think it's really interesting that she says there was no strategy. That again makes me think that Padilla wanted to tell the truth, maybe even have her take a plea bargain, and she felt like that was insufficient. She wants to be the heroine of a John Grisham novel. She really has no idea how to use the word nonetheless, but we're going to see her try again here. Nonetheless, when we did meet to discuss my case, and I asked for updates about any progress, he would start talking to me about his client in Colombia, his clown of a sister-in-law, his nephew going to water parks, trips he's taken, his regrets, where he bought his gold sneakers, and many other unrelated, unimportant, time-consuming stories. This might be my favorite Sarah Boone excerpt. This is a woman who hates small talk. So Padilla moved to withdraw. The judge granted it, and the trial was delayed. Padilla was the only attorney Sarah hired. I don't know if he was pro bono or not. I've heard that he was, but I've also heard that Brian Boone, Sarah's ex, was paying him, and I'm not sure which is true. Regardless, all her other lawyers have been court-appointed. Plus, I knew Judge Wooten would be appointing my next attorney in hopes he would listen and appoint a more suitable, experienced one accordingly, to save time for everyone to progressively move forward. He must have been throwing darts at a dartboard blindfolded. She hates everyone. Sarah Boone has never met a competent person in her life, other than her, of course. Remarkable bad luck. Even though Padilla had already withdrawn in the timeline of Sarah's narrative, she concludes with more than half a page of complaints about what a bad attorney he was. I'll just give you a sample. This attorney, number 1, is untrustworthy, unreliable, unprofessional, with poor leadership skills, and is extremely unorganized. He was unable to perform ethically and as an adult, ignoring his client, misleading and deceiving. He didn't even respect me enough to speak with before his withdrawal to try and remedy or figure anything out to stop. I was totally blindsided. Sarah's need to know everything going on is profound. It's so upsetting to her that Padilla didn't come to her to discuss why he was leaving. And I think it's because she feels like she didn't get a chance to defend herself. It's the exact same complaint as the news program. Some people have theorized that she's borderline because she's so upset about these attorneys leaving her. Personally, I don't get borderline from this, but I'm not a psychologist. I tend to agree with Dr. Barry that she seems more narcissistic and histrionic. Here, I think this was about reputation. She's embarrassed that all of these attorneys keep trying to get out of working with her. After all these complaints and insults about Padilla, she writes, "Him no longer being my attorney was not my choice." But doesn't she hate him? Why would she want him to still be her attorney? I found something in this letter that I had previously missed. The first time I read through these letters, I thought that Sarah never mentioned George. But when I reread them, I realized I was wrong. There is one line where she references him. Judge Wayne C. Wooten and the court repeatedly appointed me public defenders, 3, without any research or care. And after I continuously explained to each and tried to the judge court, they could not represent me due to their representations of the decedent. I think this is actually worse. It's worse that she calls him the decedent. This is someone she claims to have loved, someone she lived with for several years, and she's talking about him like they've never met. I find this very disturbing. I don't know if it's true that guilty people avoid saying the name of the person they hurt, but if so, this is concerning, and it's reducing people to societal roles again. George deserves the respect of being called by his name by the woman who claimed to love him. It would have been better if she just hadn't referenced him at all. She blitzes through attorneys number 2, 3, and 4, even though they're really numbers 3, 4, and 5, and basically says that she warned the court that none of them would be able to represent her due to conflicts of interest, but Judge Wooten didn't listen and has been wasting everyone's time. She goes into some detail about the attorney after that, who was unable to represent her because he was moving out of Orlando a week later. Strangely, only 3 of these attorneys appear in Judge Cranick's history of the case, and I'm not entirely certain who's correct. I love Judge Cranick. I think he's the perfect judge for this case, but his orders do contain frequent typos, and this could have been a larger error. Anyway, Judge Cranick's numbering and Sarah's numbering are again in sync. Attorney number 6 was Bankowitz. Attorney number 6, conflict, appointed by Judge Court, July 2022 to present. 1 year mark, July 11th, 2023. 12 months, 365 days, 52 weeks, summarized. 8 total months, 240 days and counting, are, with absolutely no communication in any form, completely inactive. She fills the rest of the page with bullet points, all of which include numbers, all intended to make a point about her attorney's lack of communication. I just want to point out that when Bankowitz motioned to be paid, he reported that he spent 175 hours working on Sarah's case, 45 hours of which he claims he spent with her. Then she makes a public appeal. Everyone, please look on the Orange County, Florida Clerk of the Court's website and see for yourself. Am I looking at it wrong? Reading the contents incorrectly? The mass majority of work seems to be from my correspondence. If not my letters, there's minutes, some live, to view from my non-progressive, lackluster court dates stating the same information and same continuances, and of course, none of my comments, concerns, or questions from any. I don't just sit there. Edited, like my case. Her claim that most of the contents of her case that have been made available on the clerk's website are just her letters is ridiculous. She's just lying. I think it's notable that she complains that her court dates are lackluster. Who goes to court expecting a lustrous experience? I feel like she must have grown up watching soap operas or something to have this expectation of being on trial. There's a long paragraph about how a 10-minute court date actually takes up her whole day because of security measures and transportation issues. It does sound miserable. I'm not going to say that it doesn't. Like Lois looking to the skies for Superman, I'm hoping, praying for an attorney to step up and truly represent me with honesty, intensity, understanding, respect, and perspective. When they introduce themselves, they can me also, the real me, properly, not the Frankenstein monster I'm being so wrongfully and incorrectly pieced together as from all the propagandized, lucrative, defamation, and attempted destruction of my character and still intact integrity. Clearly, also, everyone can see all of the aforementioned information regarding my attorneys was not ever a strategy of mine nor will be. Is it a strategy of the judge and court? Sarah has very strong feelings about societal roles and places a lot of importance on one's reputation in society. She brings up people's jobs over and over, emphasizing that she's a client, that Judge Wooten has to do certain things because he's a judge, that professional YouTubers are talking about her, which is true. But we're talking about her because her behavior is outrageous, and I don't think Sarah is emotionally capable of seeing that. She can't face the fact that her actions have caused all of this, and she lacks insight into how her letters are coming across. Let me tell you, the more you read these letters, the more likely you are to dislike Sarah Boone. One thing to notice here is the sentence, I'm being so wrongfully and incorrectly pieced together as from all the propagandized, lucrative defamation and attempted destruction of my character and still intact integrity. She's determined to see herself as a victim. But the really notable thing is the part that says, attempted destruction of my character. She's complaining that people are judging her based on unrealistic or inaccurate media coverage. That's not destroying her character. It's destroying her reputation. But Sarah doesn't say reputation. She says character, and I think that to her, they're the same thing. Those words are interchangeable in her mind. We're finally getting close to the end of this very long letter. She includes a passage directed at Judge Wooten. I hope I finally see my attorney, whom will, I'm sure, tell me, as you so graciously explained to me in my last pre-trial conference I was made a part of, consuming my minute minutes of your invaluable time, that you and he have other clients. I am a client and have been for over a year. This woman is furious. This passage is quintessentially Sarah Boone. She's bitter, she's sarcastic, she's passive-aggressive. She justifies her demands by reminding Judge Wooten that she is in a societal role that gives her a right to those things, and she backs up her justification with a reminder about how much time has passed. Someone definitely gave her the impression that inundating people with numbers is the way to win an argument. I don't know who this last section is for. It is addressing you, but doesn't seem to refer to Judge Wooten. I can't make heads or tails of it. And you will always have clients. You never know when you may become one yourself. Please do not discredit my truth. I am who, not what. I don't know what truth she thinks is being discredited or by whom. I've also never heard anyone call her a what and not a who. Thus ends Sarah Boone's 8th letter. The next letter was written just over a month after her last letter. It's addressed to Judge Wooten, and her tone is restrained. Polite, even. She still hasn't heard from Bankowitz, but now she has actual evidence of his behavior. She has a letter from her court-appointed private investigator saying that he hasn't been able to get a hold of Bankowitz either. It's not especially interesting, so I'll jump right to the end. Please enable progress, Judge Wayne C. Wooten, not hinder. Justice system means we have to work together. I've got the whole world incorrectly against me already. As stated by my investigator, we are at a loss without communication, in any form, with Mr. Bankowitz. Thank you for your invaluable time. I am grateful for your ethical awareness, fairness, understanding, and perspective. Activate the inactivity. Please. Again, thank you. Actively seeking success in anything. Sarah Boone. Like I said, restrained. She is capable of it. And in the context of this tone, her flattery at the end almost sounds sincere. Thus ends Sarah Boone's 9th letter. The attached letter is from Billy Lane at Prison Break Investigations. He says he can't visit Sarah in jail without a letter from Bankowitz giving him permission, but Bankowitz hasn't responded to an email or 2 text messages. Admittedly, that doesn't sound like an excessive number of attempts at contact, but I don't really know how this sort of thing works. Less than 3 weeks after the letter was written to Judge Wooten, Bankowitz motioned to withdraw again. Part of that motion read, "The defendant will not be satisfied with any attorney unless said attorney does not have a caseload and can dedicate his or her time solely to Miss Boone's case." Another passage read, "The best possible avenue is to have the defendant represent herself, as no attorney can satisfy her." Yikes. 4 days after the motion to withdraw was filed, on August 26th, 2023, Sarah wrote to Judge Wooten. Judge Wooten, how do you feel about your attorney withdrawing? During an attempted video visit by a misrepresented, shifty reporter, this is how I was made aware of my attorney, Frank J. Bankowitz, cowardly and for the second time trying to ungracefully bow out of my case. So what happened is that a court TV reporter scheduled a video visit with Sarah, and he told the jail he was a friend of hers. The jail staff apparently discovered what was happening in the middle of this call and disconnected it. Sarah is very angry that he wanted to speak to her. Mr. Matt Johnson, please honor the integrity and ethics of a real reporter and not camouflage yourself as my friend in order to push your way through the rules and regulations of the correctional facility. Professional is also an option when scheduling, but clearly does not pertain to you. Just don't schedule it at all, as I have nothing to report to you or court TV altogether. You're not even a real news channel and only add to the confusion and hysterics wrongfully, illegally, and inappropriately concocted in my case. Do not contact. She may hate court TV, but this Matt Johnson was trying to do exactly what she complained about other reporters not doing previously. I'm guessing that the jail doesn't let reporters speak to inmates, or it's some kind of pain to get permission. I assume this guy had a reason for what he did. But it doesn't sound like Sarah ended the call the moment she realized he was a reporter. So either she didn't realize, in which case she's probably just embarrassed that she got tricked, or she continued speaking to him even after she knew, and she's trying to convince the jail staff that she was tricked. Sarah's rigid belief in the value of roles is apparent here too. Real reporters have integrity, ethics. They never go undercover. This guy's not a professional, and court TV isn't a real news channel. She goes back to writing to Judge Wooten. From my perspective, am I surprised my attorney is trying yet again to give up completely? No. Is it a blessing? Yes. Let's be honest, Frank J. Bankowitz is a dud of an attorney. He is unprofessional, hides, lies, and is disrespectful. I had a feeling when other attorneys spoke about him, winced, sighed, or rolled eyes, saying they have some of his clients, and after finding his 3 public reprimands, I announced to the court, and which he said pissed him off, being the reason for his first attempted withdrawal. This was going to be an adventure, but nonetheless hoped for the best. Unfortunately, I seem to have gotten the worst. I just want to mention, because I feel bad for Bankowitz, it's 2 reprimands, not 3, and one of them was because he was in the hospital. I don't believe other attorneys were rolling their eyes at the mere mention of Bankowitz's name. When would Sarah Boone have even seen other attorneys? And I can't believe she publicly called him a dud. Thankfully, there are many other professional and scrupulous, valiant attorneys still available, and hopefully, after all my previous letters and 6 withdrawals to date, not by my choice, Judge Wooten, you will remove the blindfold this time when throwing your darts of justice at the "remember everyone has constitutional rights and should be treated fairly" dartboard. And you wear glasses, so let's go for the bullseye. Please. Thank you in advance for hopefully caring this time. She wants her attorney to be professional. Okay. Scrupulous. Not sure I understand that one. And valiant. Sarah's favorite dictionary, Merriam-Webster, defines valiant as possessing or acting with bravery or boldness, courageous, marked by exhibiting or carried out with courage or determination, heroic. So she wants Lancelot to represent her. Then she complains about Wooten still being her judge, saying judges are normally rotated every 2 years, and she not so subtly implies that he should hand off her case to another judge. Please also see finally the absolute unfairness, fabrications, impediments, illegalities, and dysfunctions ongoing in my case, and how truly unmistakably ransacked by the justice system and perverted by the whole world my entire case has been and become. Add yourself also to the mayhem, hype, and added difficulties. How does one ransack a legal case? Her word choice is just wild. Mayhem, hype, and added difficulties would probably make a great album title, though. She writes 2 paragraphs about how unfair it is that everyone else can see her case information. She compares her case to a card game. My hand is known before the cards are even out of the box. There's not a bell anywhere that hasn't already been rung for all to hear. Seeds have been planted, all illegally and unfairly. She sounds hysterical here. She's losing her mind over this. But this metaphor is also concerning. The way she chooses to compare her criminal case for second-degree M to a hand of cards. It isn't the first time Sarah has likened her case to a game of some sort. She blames Judge Wooten for all this information being public, and specifically for people having judged her before her trial. This could have been stopped, lessened, or averted if someone was doing their job correctly. I am still doing mine by telling you so. I am not wrong. Who else do I know who likes to be right? It's on the tip of my tongue. At this point, I'm starting to think that stress is affecting Sarah's ability to think clearly, because the next paragraph is incomprehensible. I think it's safe to assume that it's a variation on her usual complaints about people making money and getting clout by discussing her case. but there's a lot there I can't suss out. This comes immediately after the last excerpt, so it isn't clear what it in the first sentence refers to. Know that I still believe it all depends on how much money, notoriety, and benefits anyone and everyone can get for themselves, and however, no matter the destruction caused or the ominous, irreparable shadow made along the very lucrative way, a system for all the wrong reasons. The ominous, irreparable shadow is just something else. This doesn't sound like it was written by someone who's doing well. It makes me a little concerned for how Sarah handles stress. I mean, we know how she handles stress, right? She drinks. But she doesn't have access to alcohol in jail, and her behavior notes don't include any reprimands for drinking prison wine or anything like that. So I think she's probably really struggling without her preferred coping method. Of course, that doesn't justify any of this. Then she goes right back to complaining about Bankowitz and explaining why she doesn't want him to be her lawyer anymore. Her, again bullet-pointed list includes an accusation that he tried to use recycled components in her case. What does that mean? I can think of two possible interpretations. Either he was trying to use a resource or theory that he'd used in a previous case, or else he wanted to use a resource or theory that one of Sarah's previous attorneys had developed. She goes on and on, claiming that he tried to sell her on his stable of witnesses and saying that anyone not lobotomized can see that Bankowitz is a lousy attorney. She has a pattern here. She claims that her lawyers always try to sell her on how great they are, and then they turn out to be less than they promised. They always let her down. Next, she lectures Judge Wooten. It's a smart way to stay on a judge's good side. Judge Wooten, with everything I have stated and all my information produced to you in all my previous letters, so you are aware, clearly Bankowitz should not continue being my attorney. Wouldn't you agree? Clearly, you should have listened and reviewed much earlier when I was trying to communicate to you 10 letters ago just about him. I told you so is the message here. In case the judge can't figure out what Sarah wants him to do, she underlines and rage caps her instructions. Please grant Frank J. Bankowitz's motion to withdraw, dated 8/22/2023, as my attorney. I, Sarah Boone, permit Judge Wayne C. Wooten to release Frank J. Bankowitz entirely from my case for obvious aforementioned reasons stated. I will allow withdrawal when it should be termination. We all know it. Me and my hope. Next. One of the themes in Sarah's letters is that her only crime is continuing to hope, and that hope is what got her into this situation. It's surprisingly high concept, and it might work if it weren't so obviously not what's going on here. I could totally see a Greek tragedy with that theme, but it wouldn't involve cranky, bitter missives to lawyers, judges, and the public at large. And I don't see how locking a man in a suitcase and leaving him to die is an act of hope. In the meantime of the selection of my next attorney, aim, please. And also going forward, please enable and support me in still trying to utilize my constitutional rights and as a still proud citizen of the United States, and stop willingly, actively allowing the violations of said rights. See previous letter, dated May 15th, 2023. Please include me. Please listen to what I have to say. No one else does or has. It's my case. I think Dr. Barry was the one who pointed out that Sarah has just the most intense need to be seen and heard. She's very frightened by the idea of being powerless and invisible. She's also quite possessive in the way she talks about things. How many times has she underlined my case in these letters? A lot of people would say it's actually Georgia's case. Please know also, Your Honor, I know I am not a priority, as you condescendingly and incorrectly stated, nor am I making myself out to be or ever have been in anything my entire life. Tell me you want to be a priority without telling me you want to be a priority. Also, she claims that Wooten was incorrect when he told her that she wasn't a priority, but then she claims that she isn't making herself out to be a priority and never has been one. Yeah. Please help Bankowitz wipe the sweat from his brow and inform him he can stop the self-sabotage. He is no longer my attorney. Amen. My perseverance is real. So is my truth. I can't wait to meet the bullseye. Court appointed. Audacious gratitude, Sarah Boone. I don't know if Mr. Bankowitz has an especially sweaty brow or if Sarah is trying to imply something I didn't catch. I'm also not clear on whether or not she meant to imply that Bankowitz was doing a poor job as her lawyer in order to sabotage himself, or if she meant he was sabotaging her, in which case it wouldn't be self-sabotage. That's what she's doing. She adds court appointed as if it's some kind of win. Like, it almost feels smug, but I can't figure out why she'd be smug about that. An audacious gratitude sounds like a Brittany Dawn slogan. Then she includes a page asking Judge Wooten to mail her a copy of this letter because she doesn't have the time or ink to write one herself. And I think I've finally figured out why Sarah doesn't correct her letters. These are supposed to be the clean copies. She makes any edits she wants, either on the rough drafts or as she writes out the clean copies, but she doesn't go back and proofread to check for typos or, as I suspect is often the case, missing words. Thus ends Sarah Boone's 10th letter. 4 days after that, Sarah writes a letter to Clerk of Courts, Judge Wooten, anyone. So confused. So tired of the perpetual question marks over my head. As usual, thanks to the ongoing convolution of everything, from no communication, no system, not including me, and no care, and I can't ask my attorney because he's trying to withdraw again. I wouldn't get a response anyway. This is no way to start a letter. There isn't a single complete sentence in this paragraph. Most people will give up before the end of the third line. What happened was that Sarah had someone on the outside go onto the clerk's website and send her a list of things that had been filed in her case. And she's livid that she wasn't informed these things were filed. Even though it seems that in 3 out of 5 cases, she was informed by the court. She's mad that she wasn't also informed by her attorney. She actually demands to know why she isn't receiving copies of motions from both the court and her attorney. What does she need more than one copy for? She has very limited storage space. She's confused about upcoming court dates, and she's also confused by the legalese describing the purpose of the court dates, and that's part of why lawyers deal with these things behind the scenes and don't involve their clients. I rarely am included in the certificate of service for any document filed, or anything else. It should be an automatic inclusion. Please send revised and/or all correct copies of the aforementioned documents so I have from my records, and is the only way I know unless able to find an outside source. There isn't a lot Sarah can control in jail. That's hard for her. I don't know why she feels like she needs 2 copies of every single document ever filed in relation to her case, other than because she wants to be in control of something. So she writes 3 pages about how important it is that she get copies of everything in triplicate. Thus ends Sarah Boone's 11th letter. That is as far as we'll go this week. Please join me again next week when I'll discuss the last batch of Sarah's letters. The first of those letters was written to the judge in her divorce case after her ex-husband filed to quit paying alimony, and it reveals quite a bit about their dynamic. Hopefully by the time I record that video, I'll have gotten some insights from the trial, too. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Please don't reach out to anyone involved in the case, and remember to use your words wisely. Thanks. Illegality. Oh my God, how long is this paragraph? Consuming my minutes. What the hell? No, but you are really irritating. But that isn't the same as not having had it. Or an innumerable. Okay. So I am resending with nothing on the backs to avoid confusion. It's more jealousy than indignance. Is indignance a word? Why can I not be... What the hell is this sentence? Sarah is furious that Banka would... When would Sarah Boone have even been seeing other eternities? Eternities. What, did I just say eternities instead of attorneys? Yay, I'm done recording. Oh, well now I am.